So for scenario 2, we're going to look at document capture. WebCenter imaging also has a capture component designed for high volume, which is a centralized capture solution where batches of documents are scanned and barcodes are used to facilitate automation and validation. This eliminates the need for manual indexing. For documents that are received in electronic form, import functionality enables you to convert the content into a standard image format, index it, and store it in the same repository as scanned images. The import functionality supports email servers, fax servers, network folders, and FTP sites. WebCenter imaging is also integrated with distributed capture. Remote users can utilize desktop scanners or multifunction devices to scan and index if need via an intuitive web interface. From there, the images are sent over a secure internet either to a central location for indexing before being archived or simply archived into the content repository directly if they were indexed at the same time of the scanning by the remote user. The web-based capture client is extremely easy to use and designed for those people whose function is not back office related. So now we're going to show you document capture. So let's go into document capture and show you what this looks like. We're going to open up the scan utility, and the scan utility we're going to go ahead and simulate a scanning batch. So instead of actually automating the process, we scan them, put them on the hard drive so we can actually show you what this looks like in the real world scenario. This would all be automated. So we'll open up the files. Now these documents are the documents that Matt would have presented on his first day. So we'll open up the batch, and we're going to take a look at each one of the items, and we can rotate things, make sure things look good. For QA purposes, we can correct anything, rotate anything. We have this in there twice, so what we're going to do is go ahead and delete that. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, so now that we've QA'd it, made sure everything looks good, we'll go quickly look at all of the documents real quick. We'll go ahead and close that. And what we're going to do now is go into indexing. Now, the indexing portion, what that's going to do is that's actually going to push the items into imaging, into the repository, and that's going to automatically fire an event, which is going to send it to our workflow. And we're going to show you that in the next scenario. So let's go ahead and do that. So in indexing, we're going to do the batch indexing. And we see our batch there, which is number 11 on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in here and look at the ID number. Now, this is the barcode that we generated when we generated the offer letter in PeopleSoft. And typically, we would not have to enter that ID in because it would be fully automated. But for the sake of the demo, we're going to go ahead and enter that in. And the doc types would typically be separated by separator pages. And we're not going to be entering the first name or the last name because we're actually going to do a lookup based on that EMPL ID in the workflow and automatically filling in that information. And you'll notice as we go from page to page, the doc type will stick with the previous one. That's called sticky. It's a feature within ODC, unless we need to change it because a lot of times you'll have multiple pages and you don't want to keep clicking. So we'll go through here and we'll assign the doc types correctly. And again, this would typically be automated. There's also things like we can create macros to automatically rotate certain type of doc types, and the separator page is going to automatically clue in ODC of what it needs to do and how it needs to do it. So we have everything assigned here, and what we're going to do is go ahead and commit. So yes, we want to commit.
And now we'll see that our batch is gone. So we've completed that process. So we'll go ahead and close this. The indexing has actually pushed the images into the content repository of imaging, which has fired off an event to trigger the workflow, which we'll show you in the next scenario. Now let's continue with the presentation. The workflow provided by imaging complements PeopleSoft HR, providing flexibility regarding exception handling, the routing of documents, with a fully featured auditing and reporting capability. The reusable workflow allows you to expand the existing process to other departments, including PeopleSoft Financials or even another disparate system. So now we're going to show scenario 3. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the work list, and for this demo we've created two. We've created triage and we've created exception handling. We're going to take a look at triage first. Now what the triage is for this purpose is it's a place that when an image first comes into the system, it's going to land here, and behind the scenes it's going to look at the data associated with that image and it's going to validate the information. So if the employee number to the names don't match, then it's going to park that record here. If everything looks okay, then in this case here, it's going to communicate back to PeopleSoft, and it's going to do the necessary updates to PeopleSoft to let the recruiter know that all of the documentation, or whoever is looking at it, that all of the documentation is here. Now in the case to where we're not just doing onboard, but let's say we have legal documents coming in or we have something else coming in, it would allow somebody to make a correction and then potentially move that image to another workflow or another system in the organization, not necessarily PeopleSoft. So it's one common place where we can service all of our documents, make any modifications or adjustments to them as needed so that they can move on to the next step. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first record. And let's go ahead and click on that. And what we'll see is we'll see the document. So let's go ahead and view that document. Now in this case, what we did was when they came in, we removed all the document IDs that we added in the last scenario so that we could show you what that looks like. So let's say it came in, you know, somebody sent an email or a fax and there was no cover letter or something, and it just came in without being classified. So we would do that classification here even though we did it in the last step. As we can see here, we're going to go ahead and this is an application, so we'll call it application. And as we can see, we've got the same sort of functionality that's available here. We've got the stamp, which we showed you in the first scenario. We've got redaction, so let's go ahead and add a redaction here. We're going to knock out the salary, so we don't want, it's private information. So let's say a social security number, or there's some information that we don't want people to see. But we've got a few other things available to us. We can add text, highlight, lines, sticky notes, and then of course our redaction and then our stamp, which we saw earlier. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And what that's going to do is that's going to save that back to the content repository. So when that image is pulled up later and we'll show that redaction will still be there. So we made our change. We'll submit it. We'll go ahead and do one more here. And let's go ahead and take a look at this one. And it's going to be something that we've already looked at. Let's see what this is. So this is our offer letter. So we'll go ahead and set that content type, even though we did this before. And we'll go ahead and save that. So now as we can see at the top, those two records that we processed are no longer there. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the reports we have on the left. These reports are specific to me, so we can go ahead and take a look at, we have a priority report, we have a productivity report, we can see how many reports we process, we can put some dates in there, what kind of task, depending on what kind of filter information we put in there. These are particularly important because we may be working on more than just onboarding people. We may be doing some things for other departments. So we can certainly filter and view things by our productivity levels depending on what application. So let's go ahead and close the letter. And what we want to do now is log in as WebLogic, who is the HR administrator in this case. And what we're going to do is we're going to view the exception handling queue. And we have a couple of cases in there. So if we have an error or flat out exception, potentially a misroute, so a document was sent to the wrong department and it's sent back as an error, it can be fixed and then it would go back into the triage. So let's go ahead and log in and take a look and see what we have. So we have two cases here. Let's go ahead and look at the first one. Look at the document associated with it. Now, what we're going to do is we know we have an error, so let's go ahead and look at the EMPL ID here. And we can see that the reason this came in was because the EMPL ID does not match. So what happened was when the workflow tried to verify that EMPL ID in PeopleSoft, it was not a valid EMPL ID, and therefore it threw itself into the exception queue. So we're going to go ahead, classify the document. We're going to look this employee up. And we have a Rhonda Taylor, so let's go ahead and make sure we are looking at the right person. Yes, we have a Rhonda Taylor, so we're going to go ahead and select that employee and submit it, and that is no longer an exception, so it has left the queue and it's going to go back into the triage. So let's look at the next case. Look at the document here. And we have the same issue, it looks like, where the employee EMPL ID is incorrect, so we're going to fix that. Get it in there right. Let's add the right document, look for the employee. We're doing a real-time search to PeopleSoft, select the right person, and go ahead and commit that document. And so that's showing you how, if we do have an error, how we can handle those errors, fix any metadata issues that we have with that image, and push them back into triage so that they continue down the proper workflow. So we'll go ahead and close our documents. And now what we want to do is, since we've committed all the documents, we've taken care of all the errors, we want to go into PeopleSoft now, and we want to see the transactions and the updating process that happened in PeopleSoft once the documents were out of triage. So let's go ahead and log into PeopleSoft. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our admin center, and we're going to see that all of our scan docs, there's a checkbox there which means that all of our scan docs have been received. And if we hit the view all, we can see that all of these links actually link back to the content server. So let's go ahead and look at the original application where we made the redaction, and we'll see that all of the changes were maintained within the imaging system.